Carolina. For Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated, I'm Brendan Gulick from Value City Arena in Columbus, along with Brett Hiltbrand. This is our instant analysis from an Ohio State disappointing loss. But boy, if that's not the best college basketball game in the country that's been played so far this year, I'd like to see which one was. 92-87, the final score, Brett, and obviously a day where, boy, early on, I thought maybe Michigan was going to score 100 points. They hit 11 of their first 14 three-pointers, and it looked for a while like everything they shot was going to go in. But after they hit the first one in the second half, they missed their last 9 in a row, kind of got in a little bit of a funk, and the Buckeyes just hung around, just didn't quite have enough late.
They didn't. I think you got to give Michigan credit there for that first half and literally throwing everything in the hoop. But I think if you're Chris Holtmann and company, you're disappointed with this one because this game felt winnable, especially in the first maybe like 15 minutes of that second half. It was there for this team, and then the last 4 minutes for Ohio State, not great. Especially a stretch there where coming out of the timeout with 4 minutes to go, C.J. Walker makes 2 free throws. E.J. Liddell goes and misses a contested layup. They get a big stop in the next possession, and then the Justice Suing behind the back turnover that leads to an and one by Livers in Michigan at the other end of the floor. That one felt a little bit like a 4-point swing to me, and from that point on, it was basically all Wolverines. But you're totally right. I don't think we'll have. There definitely hasn't been a better college basketball game played to date so far this season, and I think we'll be hard-pressed to find one that exceeds what we saw in Columbus this afternoon. It was exceptional basketball. It was big boy basketball.
I mean, it was high-level, absolutely cream of the crop Division I college basketball at its finest. And if nothing else, look, somebody's going to lose the game, right? But I think you walk away from this one knowing, gee, that close. To beating a team that Chris Holtmann said, hey, this is a Michigan team that is absolutely a legitimate national championship contender. And not that the Buckeyes have been pretenders at all. They have certainly proven their worth. But to play literally step for step with a team like Michigan all game long and to go through the year the way they have, and I think this proves as much as anything, if you're an Ohio State team that has high aspirations, this makes you believe that much more that those are realistic. Maybe some better defensive rotations in the first half to avoid giving up some rhythm threes. And look, Justin Arns didn't have a very good game offensively. He only played 15 minutes, but didn't score. That was obviously unlike him, considering the way he shot the 3-ball this year. There's just a little thing here and there that could have certainly swung the game in their favor. But, man, it was a close game for sure. I think Ohio State should take a lot of confidence going into the end of the season here.
Yeah, you're totally right, and I think it speaks to a broader theme that we've kind of been touching on over the last couple of weeks, in that your window of opportunity to win against the elite teams in college basketball right now is very slim. There's no safety net against the elite best of the best, especially this year. And I think you could come down and look at it in some ways. That game came down to a couple bad rotations in the first half, an 8-0 run with about, I think, maybe 7-8 minutes into the game in the first half was a bad stretch that I think when they go back and look at the film and start doing some cut-ups, they'll definitely circle that stretch there is where they took a couple bad shots and then didn't really like the effort on defense. But the margin for error when you're trying to go up and get wins against teams that are looking at the highest of expectations you could possibly have, and that's winning a national championship. Your margin for error is borderline non-existent. It's getting a stop when you maybe shouldn't, and then going the other end and not turning the ball over. There were some very little things that probably led to Ohio State not getting a win in this game, and then I think that's an opportunity for Chris Holtmann and company to look and say we can grow in these very specific situations and circumstances.
Caroline Jan's producing for us this afternoon. Caroline, why don't you go ahead and throw up the full screen box score? You look at some of the numbers here, and I mentioned the 11 out of 14 3-pointers, and obviously, that's the biggest thing that's going to jump out for Michigan early in the game. But to me, it was maybe more Hunter Dickinson in the second half. He only had 6 points in the first half, his 16 in the second half, and every one of them felt like they were really tough buckets, where if you're not 7-2, maybe you don't score, or 7-1 or whatever he's listed at. But the thing that I most take away from watching this Michigan team, it's hard to appreciate unless you're watching them in person how big they are. They've got 10 players on the roster at 6'5" or bigger. And frankly, they're all athletic. They can all move. They pretty much can all shoot it. They defend at a high level. I mean, this team is legit. And, their size was a problem for sure.
And that's what we talked about when we were previewing this game and talking about Penn State previously. Like, what's like the one thing that we could kind of foresee giving Ohio State problems offensively? And I'm air quoting problems here because they did score 80 some points, is length. And length is also a factor on the offensive end when that length is able to shoot it. And, there were some matchups that I don't think that Ohio State matched up super well with them, certainly undersized. But I also think, the length, Michigan uses that length really effectively, especially with how they use Hunter Dickinson inside to then create shots elsewhere. And, even if he touches the ball, and even if he's not necessarily shooting and scoring, in the first half, we saw that, right? Where if he touched the ball would sometimes go right back out. And then it was a pass, maybe two passes to an open three, because Ohio State was focusing so much attention on the big man inside. That freed up a lot of open looks on the outside. That's a great example of where length can make a difference. And so on the offensive end. And I think if you're Ohio State, I think you look back at that and say that we can do a couple things really better in those situations, because they are going to face some big-time big men similar to Dickinson later in this year. And that's less help, I think, from guard play on the inside. And I think it's relying on your bigs to be able to defend one-on-one in those moments with a little bit less help side than maybe we've seen previously. I also think you can affect bigs by going at them on the offensive end, and we didn't really see that a ton in the first half. If you go ahead and look down, here at the full screen, and you look at the personal foul column for Michigan, Hunter Dickinson only has 2 fouls in this game. I would guess that's probably his season low this year. And you can affect his playing time. You can affect his offensive effort by going at him a little bit more on the offensive end when Michigan's on defense. I think that's something that you maybe could see and think Ohio State could have improved upon a little bit in this game for sure.
Apologize for some of the background noise. You can probably see behind me, but they are flipping the floor now from where it was for basketball to get ready for the men's hockey game. And admittedly, I have to check. I'm not sure if the hockey game is tonight or if it's tomorrow, but this is a pretty typical ritual after games if you've certainly been here at the shot.
Tradition unlike any other, let me tell you.
Yeah.
You haven't. Right. Everybody who's worked in Columbus television at one point or another has experienced the trying to do your post game stand-ups with the noise going on in the background. That it's a rite of passage, baby. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Hey, we haven't even talked about Dwayne Washington yet, right? He had 30 points. He was unbelievably good today. I bring it up not just because it's a career high for him, but because we're talking about a guy that now 2 games in a row has been pretty efficient on the offensive end. He made some tough buckets today. Obviously hit 5 3-pointers, the second of which was like banana land. I mean, in front of Michigan's bench with the shot clock expiring, fading away, throws up one that almost hits the rafters before it finally falls in. He was terrific. Do you think maybe Dwayne Washington's turning a corner now? Because if he plays like this, again, the ceiling for Ohio State feels that much higher.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the ability of we saw today, we saw something that I've kind of been preaching a little bit over the last couple of weeks when it comes to who can score against elite competition. And in some ways, it actually speaks maybe to a tiny weakness of Ohio State. And a lot of times when we see, teams that have a ton of positive momentum coming into the NCAA tournament, they're scoring efficiently out the wazoo, and everybody is kind of getting in the action. Then all of a sudden you get to the tournament and the elite guys are still able to go out and score. It's can you get scoring from the bench? Can you get 9, 10, 12, 14 points maybe from the guys who are maybe 4 or 5, even in 6, as far as the, kind of the scoring tallies are concerned. And I think that's a problem a little bit with Ohio State, because we saw that it kind of dropped off a little bit. You have 30 for Dwayne, 23 for EJ Liddell, and then 15 for CJ Walker. And then the next closest person is 6. So that gap, you have to try and close that gap a little bit if you're Chris Holtmann and company.
Well, but the other thing that go ahead.
No, I do think it speaks to, in some ways, the confidence of Dwayne Washington too, right? That's probably his best game in an Ohio State uniform, not just from a scoring standpoint, but I also thought he was really good on the defensive end, minus one bad rotation, which led to a layup for Michigan in, I think, the final minute. That was maybe not great, but and he had a bad turnover. He had one turnover in this game, and I think it was a bad one. But overall, I thought it was a pretty special game from him, and I do think that bodes well for Ohio State. His confidence remaining high, the ability to shoot it, especially when there's a hand in his face, is big. He also gets to the rim. For a guy who's not super big, he really gets to the rim and finishes efficiently in and amongst the trees. It was an outstanding game for him for sure, and I think that's huge for Ohio State going forward.
Whether you're watching live on our YouTube channel or if you're on Twitter, feel free to drop a comment. We'd love to interact with you and get your thoughts and maybe react based off of what you say and what you thought about this game. You can certainly subscribe to our YouTube content. We'd love to have you back regularly. We do this quite a bit. Brett, when you look at the box score, the other thing that really jumps out to me is the number of minutes played. Chris Holtmann basically had 5 guys on the floor that he wanted out there for most of the game. Justin Arns regularly now has been a starter, but not necessarily a guy that's playing 25 to 30 minutes a game. CJ Walker, comfortable coming off the bench, and yet, he's going to play probably more minutes than just about anybody else. It's becoming more and more clear where the message early in the season was, hey, how's this team going to fit? What do the pieces look like now? It's, okay, these 5 with no foul trouble, these 5 seem to be the 5 that Chris Holtmann wants out there in crunch time. And those 5, obviously, in the front court are EJ Liddell and Kyle Young, CJ Walker, who's started the beginning of the year still dealing with a hand injury, Justice Suing, and then, of course, Dwayne Washington.
Yeah, and that's the group that I think, in addition to getting the core minutes, I think that's probably your best personnel grouping to be efficient at both ends of the floor. And I think in a game like this, especially in the first half with Michigan, who was throwing everything in the hoop, that you have to try and find, you have to kind of rely on that, on what is probably your best personnel grouping on defense to go out and try and get stops. I also do think there's some rebounding efficiencies with not having defensive rebounding efficiencies with not having Arns on the floor. I would guess they upgrade a little bit because that means CJ Walker's probably on the ball, and then there's more length inside for the potential defensive rebound opportunities. But it's interesting too. Chris Holtmann said after the game, if you happen to catch the press conference, on the live stream, that we tweet out, and I would encourage everyone if you're who's watching now to watch the press conferences, because I think it's informative if you like to peel back a layer or two, to actually kind of not only do you get the context, but you also kind of get the tone and how you hear Ohio State, the players and Chris Holtmann, how they say things after the game. I think is also important. But Chris Holtmann, mentioned that he doesn't think this Ohio State team has the ability or potential to be elite, his words, elite defensively. And that's just fine, because I think we've seen this team prove throughout the entire season that they don't necessarily have to be that to go out and be successful. But I do think there is certainly room for improvement. And I think especially it's their on the ball pressure and its defensive rotations. We saw that with Penn State just not super long ago. Some of the rotations were not great. To improve in those two specific areas, I think would go a long way towards reducing an opponent's offensive efficiency. And I also think that leads to breakouts going the other way. And we know Ohio State can be, deadly in basically every facet offensively.
Caroline, you can lose the box score here. And first comment that we had that came in from Barry Eastbrush says, Wolverines ain't no joke. Well, I agree. Michigan is about as good a team as I've seen all year. And again,
and they're going to be better next year,
which is scary and kind of annoying,
hard to
frankly.
Yeah.
For as good as these two teams are, I think both Ohio State and Michigan are capable of beating Gonzaga and Baylor if they're going to end up seeing each other potentially in the NCAA tournament somewhere. The difference right now between Gonzaga and Baylor and then the next 4, 5, 6 teams that are kind of chopping at the bit trying to get a number 1 seed, the difference has really been consistency. But I think Michigan is bigger than Gonzaga is. I'm not sure they're bigger than Baylor.
Probably more similar.
Yeah, I'd have to look at Baylor's roster a little bit more closely. But, when I've watched Gonzaga and Baylor throughout the year, they're good. Like, they're really, really good. But these two teams are both capable of winning in a matchup with those two. So, you get into the NCAA tournament, these two teams are certainly going to play in the NCAA tournament. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and where. And it's going to come down to matchups. And Ohio State at times this year has struggled with teams that have a 7-foot-tall guy. 3 of the 5 losses are to Purdue and Michigan. And Zach Edey, who doesn't play a ton for Purdue, but when he's out there, he's been tough. Obviously, Travion Williams has had a really good season. It's an Ohio State team that might be a little undersized. I know we talk about that a lot, but when you're playing elite teams that can defend the paint the way these guys have, 1-2 possessions can be the difference in a game. And we're sitting here at the end of this saying, hey, it was a 5-point game. Ohio State hit 3 to come within 1 possession with just a couple seconds ago. They just kind of ran out of time. But Michigan's size did make a big difference today.
You think of all the millions of people that watched this game today, one guy in particular who was almost certainly watching this game and kind of wondering what it means for his team, Fran McCaffrey at Iowa.
Yeah.
And given that Ohio State plays them 4 days from now, and they have a very similar player in Luka Garza, and as far as a big, who's a space eater, but is really, really good on the offensive end of the floor. I think in some ways, a game like today is the perfect kind of setup for facing someone like Garza in a few days after. He's like, now you know what you're getting, right? You've experienced kind of the physicality of that. Win, lose, especially if you play well, win or lose. And I think we will all agree that Ohio State played pretty well tonight, this afternoon. I think it bodes well for them, going up against Iowa too. And I think if you're Fran McCaffrey, you watch this game and you're like, gosh, man, can we catch a break? This Ohio State team, when are they going to have an off night? I mean, they play one of the best teams in the country, and they come within probably 2.5 possessions of beating them. And that's another team that I think we're looking at as far as, a tournament team that has the potential to make it a crazy good run. And, I think Mark Titus made the joke on Twitter that the Justice Suing turnover was a heat check to make sure that Ohio State didn't peak too early, and which I thought was really funny. And then I got jealous that I didn't think of that idea first.
That's pretty funny.
But I think it kind of speaks to this larger point that, right, like, we're talking about all this tournament and being prepared and perfectly set up. None of that matters if you peak in February, right? And so
Sure.
all of this, I think, is incremental building, incremental improvement to being able to play your best basketball at the right time. And I think, Iowa is another opportunity for this Ohio State team to know kind of what they're going to face come tournament time against the elite talent that is out there. That's length and a big physical presence inside.
We'll go here for a couple more minutes live. Neil Harris says, actually, U of M was tired. The Buckeyes are in better shape. I got to be honest, I kind of felt the opposite way. I think Michigan probably benefited from the 3 weeks off. They've got fresh legs. They might have gotten tired at certain points or maybe a little lazy on defense. But I actually thought the last 5 minutes of the game, Ohio State looked a little bit more lethargic. And that was part of the reason why Michigan was able to take that 1 or 2 steps forward and basically play from out front. But again, like that whole second half, I think it was the 4:33 mark, if I remember correctly. That was the first time that Michigan led by more than 4 points the whole second half. I mean, it was basically a one-possession game the entire way. And, I do think fatigue played into it a little bit more, but I'm more inclined to think that maybe the Buckeyes, who have been grinding through this season, and Chris Holtmann has said every time he's talked to the media, how badly that they need a couple days to heal up. I thought it was more the other way around.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much fatigue played into it. I think maybe I've always kind of been of the opinion that the next game following is a good way to judge how much fatigue was actually a factor in the previous one. Sure. So maybe against Iowa, we can maybe kind of peek at that a little bit. But Michigan still had, was playing basically 6 guys, for 25 minutes or more, I would guess, which is pretty much identical to Ohio State. I do think that, one thing that, we've been talking about, obviously, with Ohio State and how proficient they are on offense. I don't know if I would use the word effortless when it comes to watching them be so dynamic on that end of the floor. It doesn't look effortless. It looks hard. It's extremely physical. It requires obviously an extreme amount of physical exertion. And I've been saying this now for probably 2 weeks that I wonder how much of that grind is going to affect them long term. And so I don't know how much Michigan looked tired, and I'm not exactly sure how much I would say Ohio State looked tired, but I do think that it's something that we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on for sure, because it doesn't get any easier in this next game. I mean, we can talk about whether or not Michigan State is, a quote unquote night off. I don't think one of those exists in the Big Ten. But then you're picking it right back up. And then it's conference tournament and NCAA tournament time. So, I mean, I think you could maybe make the argument that Ohio State getting knocked out in the conference tournament early and having a couple days off might be a good thing. But you'll never hear anyone from the Columbus camp say that. But I mean, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think there are legs that are, if they're not weary yet, they're maybe the next step below.
Well, as a fan, if you watched at home, I certainly hope you enjoyed the game. I realized it was kind of a privilege to be here in front of basically a family and friends crowd. There were only maybe a couple hundred people here total on the opposite side of the arena. And, I assume there were probably a couple million people watching at home. And the first top 5 matchup in the history of Ohio State versus Michigan on the basketball floor, in a lot of ways, lived up to the hype. I mean, this was a legit high-level, terrific basketball game that, again, the Buckeyes are certainly disappointed to have lost. I thought that the tone that Dwayne Washington and E.J. Liddell and Chris Holtmann used in their post-game press conference, echoed the disappointment, but I didn't sense any despair in the way that they spoke. It was, look, we can't give up 92 points if we're going to win. Pretty hard to outscore somebody when you give up 92 points. Look, that's a legit basketball team, and it's going to take a full 40 minutes to beat them. I think we got a couple of other comments on here we'll get to. Let's see. Neil came back and said he saw Michigan kind of bending over at a couple of timeouts when they were certainly looking for some air. And, I'll give you that for sure. Yeah. I just thought there was a general slower nature to the way the Buckeye defense was rotating late in the game that kind of was where I was taking that. Graham Naden said Michigan's just a better team, and this game proved it. Go Blue. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit here, and we appreciate that. And Barry Eastbrush says the Wolverines ain't no joke. Well, that's for sure. That was definitely a pretty impressive team. So, anyways, Ohio State loses today. Final score 92-87. Your final thoughts, Brett?
I say this with absolute certainty that this was the first top 5 meeting between these two programs in history. It's not going to be the last. That will happen again in the very, very near future. I think if you're a Michigan basketball fan, holy crap, the future is bright, because if you like this team now, wait till you see what comes to Ann Arbor next year. And probably the year after that too, because we all know that college basketball, it has a tendency to come in bunches when it comes to recruiting. And I think Ohio State's got a good thing going too in that regard. So more of that, please. That's that type of game. That was one of the best basketball games I've seen in the last 10 years. More of that, and let's hope it happens again in the postseason. Good stuff.
Yeah, fingers crossed for sure that these two teams would see each other again. Michigan definitely the better team today when it counted late. Buckeyes gave them a pretty good run, but just not quite enough yet. Really, really important game coming on Thursday for Ohio State. They'll play at Michigan State before coming back home to play Iowa next Sunday. And then they'll close the regular season the following Saturday at home against Illinois. What a brutal last 4 games of the regular season. Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, Illinois. The Buckeyes will certainly be battle-tested going into March, that's for sure. For Caroline Jans, who did a great job producing today, and for Brett Hiltbrand, I'm Brendan Gulick. This is Instant Analysis on Buckeyes Now. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have content like this pretty regularly for you. Certainly talk about a lot of things Ohio State basketball and certainly Ohio State football. And go to BuckeyesNow.com for all the latest. We'll see you again next time. Final score today, Michigan 92, Ohio State 87.